but not getting near the type of respect that Ohio State does. Here's SC Athletic Director Mike Bohn.
Well, obviously, I think their brand and their recent performance certainly helps them immensely. I mean, coming to SC after spending 6 years in the state of Ohio at the University of Cincinnati, I get a good sense of what their prowess is and the way they've accomplished so many different things. So, my hat's off to them. I've competed against them from numerous institutions, and I understand that. I think that's why Friday's a big opportunity for us. I really do. I mean, when you start comparing some of the different power indexes and so forth, we'll see how that shakes out. But our focus right now is on Friday.
And that's exactly where it should be, as the Trojans can win a Pac-12 championship, and that means something. But for the purpose of our discussion, we talk playoff here. Now, USC has the same record as Ohio State, but in my judgment, they're not close to the same teams. SC's had to pull a couple games out of the fire, one of them against a very poor opponent, the other two against very average opponents. You look at this now, and big brands do get the benefit of the doubt, Kirk, and if USC had been dominant, I think they might have gotten some of the benefit of the doubt that Ohio State has gotten, but they haven't looked the same. You look at the two teams play, and Ohio State has controlled its games in a far greater manner than the Trojans have.
Yeah, people bring up eye test, and you can use eye test or you can actually use metrics. I mean, you can look at the efficiency. It favors Ohio State considerably, is what you just said. Game control favors Ohio State considerably. The strength of schedules is in favor of USC. Neither one is great, but the difference is the way Ohio State has played. Ohio State, they've had huge leads on some teams and have allowed teams to come back, and they still are up very high as far as game control. So I think that's the biggest difference. That and Joey, the team that was coming in. You know how you're not supposed to look at teams before the season starts, but with the team that Ohio State had last year and a lot of those players coming back, I think Ohio State had a lot of momentum coming into this year, and I don't think they've done necessarily anything to diminish that based on the games that they played in.
No, and it's always interesting to me, and we've always had discussions about, at times you don't control your schedule. And especially in this season, you had zero control over your schedule. So if you're going to play an Arizona State team that is now sitting at 1-2, you can't have tipped passes at the end to find a way to beat them by 1 point. That was the moment when all of a sudden it was like, USC might not be as good as we thought. And then they play Arizona the next week, who is now sitting at 0-5. And it was a 4-point victory. Again, very close at the end. And then this past weekend, to win the game at the end against an average UCLA team, it just opens your eyes to say, look, you're undefeated, but you haven't made the statements that we needed to see to get you into this conversation. Ohio State has made those statements besides the very close game to Indiana, which was a top 10 team at the time. So the difference is when you watch these two teams play, it's not just the 5-0 record at the end. It's how you arrived at 5-0 that has hurt USC.
No doubt. Who you've played, who you've beaten is obviously a big stipulation with the committee. I think USC's 5-0 and their 5 opponents have a combined 7 wins. If you watch the UCLA game last week, I think if you watch that, they play that game again, you might favor UCLA. So I don't think it's a bias. I think it's fair. I think USC on defense, you question them on defense. On offense, you've had moments where you've questioned them as well. So I think they're a really good football team. I would love to have seen them play more games against competitive folks, but they've played a less than desirable schedule and they haven't looked great. So that's not something that you're going to say, oh, man, we need to be fighting for them to put them in the top 5, put them in the top 6. It's not at that point, Jesse.
Yeah, David, I think it's just as simple as Ohio State's a better team and they're playing in a better conference. And you guys have alluded to the game control and how dominant they've been. Consider that Ohio State probably played their C- game against Indiana, a team the committee has ranked, I think, 11 right now. And they were winning that game 35-7 before things started getting weird. And you guys have talked about how USC has had to come back in 3 of their games. It's not just us saying this, by the way. The committee, in their very first college football playoff ranking, had Ohio State at 4, and they had USC at number 18. Now, I said it at the beginning of the show, it doesn't help USC when you're not playing anybody that's ranked, and that's on the Pac-12. I also think from a committee standpoint, you're not supposed to evaluate what's happened in the past, but I do think in some people's subconscious, they remember seeing USC give up 49 points against Iowa in the Holiday Bowl just this past season, a Big Ten team. So I think all of that plays into why Ohio State is ranked so much higher than USC at this point.
Hey, look, I think USC is dangerous on offense. I would have loved to have seen them have that opportunity they originally had scheduled against Alabama in the season opener. And, you know, people say, well, why aren't you giving them credit for the victories? In my estimation, we are, because we're having this discussion, right? We're having the discussion as to why their record is not giving them the same place that Ohio State has attained. And the reason is because they won the game. So they're getting credit for it, and they deserve it. It's not easy to win, and USC's been able to do that without blemish so far, and they have a chance to win a conference championship.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.